The billionaire had cameras hidden in every corner of his mansion, watching every step the new maid took, waiting for her to make one single mistake. He didn't trust her gentle smile or her soft voice. To him, kindness was only a trick people used before they stabbed you in the back. After the car accident that took his wife's life and left his only son paralyzed, Michael Scott's heart had turned hard. He trusted no one. Not the doctors who promised hope, not the workers who pretended to care, not even the people who said they wanted to help. So when the new maid named Sandra arrived with calm eyes and quiet manners, he saw her as just another liar waiting for a chance. He ordered new hidden cameras to be installed all over the mansion, even inside his son David's bedroom. Every night, Michael sat alone in his dark office, watching the screens, waiting for the moment she would prove him right. But what he saw instead made his hands go cold. On one of the recordings, Sandra was not stealing or lying. She was kneeling beside his son, whispering something softly, her hands steady on the boy's shoulders. And then, something impossible happened. The boy, who had not moved his legs in years, tried to lift himself. Michael leaned closer to the screen, his eyes shaking. He had installed those cameras to catch a thief, but what he captured that night shattered the walls he had built around his heart. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt his chest tighten with something he didn't understand, something that made his eyes fill with tears he had forgotten how to cry. Michael Scott lived in a house so big that silence sounded louder than any noise. The walls were white, the floors shiny, and the air inside felt empty. Every sound echoed, even the smallest footstep. Since the day he lost his wife in a car crash, the mansion had turned into a place of sorrow. The same crash that took her life had also left his son, David, paralyzed. That pain broke something deep inside him. He was no longer the same man who once smiled freely. Michael stopped trusting people. Over the years, many workers came and left. Some stole from him, others lied, a few even sold private pictures of his home to the news. Every betrayal cut him deeper, and soon he decided no one was worthy of trust again. His heart grew hard, his face cold, and his world smaller. Now he lived with only his son and a few staff members who followed strict rules. Everyone walked on eggshells around him. No one dared to speak unless it was important. The workers said, "Good morning," with fear in their voices. They knew their boss watched everything. Cameras were in every hallway, every door, and every room except his office. Michael didn't watch those cameras for safety. He watched them to protect himself from people. Every night, he sat in his office with the screens glowing before him. He stared at them like a man waiting for proof that his fears were right. When his old maid resigned, an agency sent a new one named Sandra. She arrived on a cold Monday morning carrying a small brown bag and an envelope of papers. She was in her late 20s, dressed neatly in a plain uniform. Her voice was soft, her tone polite. She greeted him with a small smile, but he didn't smile back. "You'll follow the rules in this house," Michael said firmly. "No visitors, no calls inside my son's room, no photos, and no secrets. You do your job and stay out of trouble. Do we understand each other?" Sandra nodded quietly. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice calm. Michael stared at her for a moment before turning away. He didn't care who she was or what her story was. To him, she was just another person pretending to care until she found something to take. He had learned to see kindness as danger. That same evening, after everyone went to bed, Michael sat before his monitors again. He had ordered new hidden cameras installed, small ones that no one would notice. He wanted every corner covered, even inside David's bedroom. The staff didn't know, not even Sandra. Only he had access to the control room in his office. As the screens came alive, Michael leaned forward,
studying Sandra's every move. She cleaned quietly, her motions slow and careful. She folded clothes neatly and dusted the tables. Nothing strange. But Michael didn't relax. He had seen this before. People always acted perfect at the start. It was only a matter of time before they slipped. He switched between screens, checking the kitchen, the living room, and the hallway near David's room. He watched her enter his son's bedroom. David sat in his wheelchair, facing the window, silent, as always. The boy rarely spoke since the accident. Sandra walked in gently and said, "Good evening, David. How are you feeling today?" David didn't answer. He just stared out the window, lost in thought. Sandra didn't push him. She placed a blanket over his legs, adjusted his pillow, and softly said, "I'll be here if you need anything." Then she sat in the corner chair, humming a quiet tune. Michael narrowed his eyes. He didn't trust the way she moved so calmly. He zoomed the camera closer, searching for something wrong, but there was nothing. She didn't touch anything she shouldn't, didn't pick up her phone, not even glance at the camera. She simply stayed near his son, patient and silent. Hours later, when Sandra left the room, Michael leaned back in his chair, frowning. "Too perfect," he muttered to himself. "They always start like this." The next day was quiet. Sandra followed every rule. She spoke politely to the other workers and focused mostly on David. Slowly, Michael noticed small changes. His son looked a little brighter, his face less empty. One afternoon, through the camera, he saw David smiling faintly while Sandra read from a book. It was a small smile, barely there, but for Michael, it stirred something. That night, he sat again in front of the screens. His eyes stayed fixed on the footage. He watched Sandra helping David eat, then adjusting the curtains so the sunlight wouldn't bother him. The camera caught the way she talked to him, not like a patient, but like a friend. Michael's hands tightened around his chair. He felt a strange mix of unease and curiosity. What is she trying to do? Why is she acting like she cares? He didn't want to admit what he saw. There was no sign of theft, no secret calls, no lies. Instead, there was care, patience, and warmth, things that didn't belong in his cold world anymore. Later that night, while checking the camera in David's room one last time, Michael saw something that made him pause. David was awake, and Sandra sat beside him, talking softly. He couldn't hear the words clearly, but he saw his son's lips move as if he was answering her. It was the first time in years that he had seen David trying to speak. Michael froze. For a long moment, he couldn't look away. His chest felt tight, but he quickly pushed the feeling aside. "She's manipulating him," he said quietly. "That's all this is." He closed the laptop and leaned back, staring into the dark. The sound of the rain outside filled the room, but he didn't move. Deep down, something about what he saw bothered him, not because he thought she was wrong, but because he feared he was wrong. And for the first time in a long time, Michael couldn't tell if the danger he saw was real or just the fear inside his own heart.
The next morning, the sun shone through the wide windows of the Scott mansion, but it did not make the house feel warm. Michael sat at the dining table, his coffee untouched, his eyes on his phone screen. The security app was open, showing silent images from the hidden cameras. He scrolled through the recordings from the night before, watching Sandra move quietly through the halls like a shadow. Every step she took looked careful, almost too careful. He tapped on the video from his son's bedroom. Sandra was there again, kneeling beside David, adjusting his blanket. She smiled as she spoke, her voice low. The microphone didn't catch her words clearly, but her tone was gentle. Michael watched David's face closely. The boy looked calm, more relaxed than usual. Then Sandra reached for something, a small wooden box on the nightstand. She opened it,
and soft music began to play. Michael frowned. He didn't remember seeing that box before. "Where did she get that?" he muttered. His mind began to spin with questions. He zoomed in on the screen, watching every move. She wound the box gently, set it beside David, and said something that made the boy smile. It had been months since he had seen that smile, but instead of comfort, Michael felt tension in his chest. "She's using tricks," he whispered to himself. "She's trying to win his trust." He closed the app and finished his cold coffee in one sip. All day, those images stayed in his mind. He went through his meetings like a man distracted. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the way Sandra looked at his son, and how his son looked back. It wasn't fake, it was real, and that scared him even more. That night, Michael didn't sleep. The mansion was quiet, only the soft hum of the cameras filling his office. He sat staring at the screens again, switching from one room to another. At midnight, Sandra appeared on the feed, walking slowly toward the living room with a small lamp in her hand. She checked the windows, fixed a fallen cushion, then sat down for a few minutes, looking lost in thought. Michael leaned closer to the screen. Her expression wasn't sneaky. It was tired, almost sad. But he didn't believe it. He couldn't. They all act innocent, then they show their real face. He watched her until she stood up and went back to her room. For a long time after that, he kept the screen on her door. Nothing happened. She didn't sneak out, didn't make any calls, didn't touch anything that wasn't hers. Still, he didn't stop watching. The next morning, Sandra went to David's room as usual. She greeted him softly and began helping him stretch his arms. Michael watched from his tablet as he ate breakfast in his office. She told David stories while she worked, simple stories about growing up, about the noise of the city, about her mother who used to sing while cleaning. David listened carefully, his face alive with curiosity. "Do you miss her?" he asked her suddenly. Sandra paused for a moment. "Every day," she replied, her voice gentle. "But I believe people like her never really leave. They stay through the love they gave." Michael's fork froze in midair. He felt something heavy in his throat as he watched them. David nodded slowly, then whispered, "My mom used to say that too." Sandra smiled. "She must have been a wonderful woman." Michael turned off the tablet. He couldn't listen anymore. Her words felt too close. It was as if she knew exactly what to say to make them both remember what they had lost. He didn't want anyone to touch that pain, not even softly. Later that day, while walking through the hallway, he overheard two of the older staff members talking quietly near the kitchen door. "She's good with the boy. He's smiling again because of her." Michael stopped, listening from behind the wall. "It's strange. I've never seen him laugh like that before. Maybe she's the first person who truly cares." Michael walked away before they noticed him. His jaw was tight. Everyone was falling for her act, he thought. Everyone but him. That night, Michael called the security company again. "I need more coverage," he said coldly. "Add smaller cameras in the bedrooms and near the back garden. I don't care how much it costs. Just do it quietly." The next morning, the technicians came, while Sandra took David outside for fresh air. They placed the devices quickly and left. By noon, the new feeds appeared on Michael's screen. He could now see everything, every corner, every breath, every step. That evening, when the house was quiet, he opened the feed from David's room again. The boy sat in his wheelchair, looking at the music box on the table. Sandra knelt beside him, guiding his hands. "Try it slowly," she said softly. "You can do it." David pressed his hands against the sides of the chair, his arms shaking slightly. His legs barely moved, but his face showed effort. Michael's heartbeat slowed. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. Sandra encouraged him again, her hand steady on his shoulder. "See, you moved a little," she said with a smile. David laughed faintly, almost in disbelief. Michael's breath caught. He couldn't understand what he was seeing. The boy had not even tried for years. Now, with her, he was trying. He watched for several minutes, silent and frozen. The boy kept trying. Sandra kept helping. When she said, "That's enough for today," David smiled again. Michael didn't move from his chair for a long time. The screen glowed softly before him, showing the maid cleaning up, then turning off the lights. His son slept peacefully, something he rarely did. Michael rubbed his forehead, feeling a weight in his chest. What is she doing to him? What is she doing to me? Outside, the night was quiet. The mansion stood still, but inside Michael's heart, something had begun to change, something he didn't understand and didn't want to admit. He had spent years watching people to find reasons to hate them, but now, for the first time, he was watching someone and finding reasons he couldn't explain. And he didn't know yet that the cameras he installed to expose the maid would soon expose him instead.
The next few days passed slowly inside the mansion. Sandra's presence began to fill the quiet spaces that used to echo with emptiness. David's laughter sometimes reached the halls, soft but clear. The staff noticed, but Michael did not see it as joy. To him, it was confusion. Every smile his son gave the maid made him uneasy. He believed she was building trust for a reason, and he wanted to know why. He spent his nights in the control room, eyes red from staring at the screens. His phone beside him showed live feeds from every corner of the house. The new cameras were hidden well, behind lamps, mirrors, and picture frames. No one suspected anything. One evening, as he watched the footage, Michael saw Sandra cleaning his office. She dusted the shelves, wiped the table, and arranged some files. Then she stopped. Her eyes fell on a framed photograph lying flat on the desk. It was the last family photo taken before the accident. Him, his wife, and little David. Sandra lifted the frame carefully and smiled sadly. Her lips moved, but the microphone barely caught her words. Michael turned up the volume. "He had such a kind face," she whispered. Michael froze. His hand tightened around the mouse. How could she know that? He thought. His father's photo was in that frame too, standing behind them, smiling proudly. His father had died many years ago. No one in the house had ever met him. Michael replayed the clip again and again, listening to her voice. He had such a kind face. The way she said it wasn't casual. It sounded like someone remembering. Suspicion rushed through him. He opened her background check again, reading line by line. Everything looked clean. No criminal record, no strange connections, but he didn't believe it. He had been fooled before. That night, when the house went silent, Michael walked through the hallway with slow steps. He stopped in front of Sandra's door. His hand hovered over the knob. For a moment he hesitated, then pushed it open quietly. The room was neat. Her uniform hung by the door, her small bag on the table. A Bible lay on the nightstand beside a candle, and a photo of her with an older woman, probably her mother. Michael began searching through her drawers, careful not to make noise. In one of them, he found a small silver locket wrapped in a cloth. It looked old, its edges worn. He opened it. Inside were two pictures, one of his father, the same man from the family photo, and another of a woman he didn't recognize. Michael's stomach twisted. "What is this?" he whispered. He sat on the bed, the locket shaking in his hand. None of it made sense, but his fear turned to anger. He convinced himself that this was proof. She must have known his family before. Maybe she had come to spy on him or use his son to get close. He closed the locket, put it in his pocket, and left the room. The next morning, Sandra greeted him with her usual calm smile. "Good morning, sir," she said. Michael did not respond.
He only said, "Meet me in the office after you finish breakfast." Sandra's smile faded slightly, but she nodded. When she entered the office later, Michael stood behind his desk, the locket in his hand. His face looked hard, his voice cold. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Sandra blinked, confused. "That belongs to me," she said softly. "It was my mother's." "Don't lie to me. Why is my father's picture inside it? How do you know him?" Sandra's eyes widened in shock. "Your father?" she whispered. "Sir, I—" "Answer me," he shouted. His voice echoed through the room. Tears filled Sandra's eyes, but she stayed calm. "No, sir," she said. "My mother worked for your parents many years ago. She told me stories about them, about how kind they were. The locket was a gift from your father to her before she left. When she died, she gave it to me. That's all." Michael shook his head. "That's too convenient," he said bitterly. "You think I'll believe that?" "It's the truth," Sandra replied softly. "I have nothing to hide. I only came here to care for your son." Michael's face tightened. "Enough. Pack your things and leave my house today. I won't be fooled again." Sandra stood still, her voice trembling slightly. "You're making a mistake, sir." "Get out," he pointed to the door. Sandra's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. She lowered her head and walked out quietly. From the hallway, some of the workers watched her leave with confusion. No one dared to speak. She packed her few belongings and handed her uniform to the head maid. Before leaving, she went to David's room. The boy looked up, his face full of fear. "Are you leaving?" he asked, his voice breaking. Sandra knelt beside him, holding his hands. "I have to go for now," she said softly. "But remember what we practiced. You are stronger than you think." He shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong. I know you didn't." Sandra smiled faintly, trying not to cry. Sometimes the truth takes time to be seen, but it always comes. She hugged him gently, then stood up and walked toward the door. David called out her name, but she didn't turn back. When Michael saw the car leaving the mansion, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He told himself it was relief, but it wasn't. That night he entered his office again and opened the camera recordings, hoping to find something that would prove he was right. He watched every clip, every minute, but there was nothing. No secret calls, no hidden meetings, no signs of lies. Then he reached the video from 2 nights before. Sandra was tucking David into bed. She leaned down, kissed the boy's forehead, and whispered, "You're going to walk again, I promise." Michael froze. He stared at the screen for a long time. The words echoed in his mind, soft but heavy. He pressed pause and sat back slowly. For the first time in years, his eyes filled with tears. The woman he had thrown out had given his son no doctor could: hope. And as he wiped his face, one painful truth struck him. The cameras he used to protect himself had captured his own cruelty.
The next morning, the mansion felt emptier than ever. The air was heavy, and even the birds outside seemed quieter. David refused to eat. He refused to talk. He only sat by the window, staring at the driveway where Sandra's car had disappeared the day before. Michael tried to act like everything was normal. He walked through the house, pretending to check on things, but every step echoed with guilt. The staff spoke in whispers, afraid to say anything that might anger him. No one dared to mention Sandra's name, but her absence was felt everywhere. That night, Michael sat alone in his office again. He opened his laptop and watched the recordings one more time, hoping he had done the right thing. But the more he watched, the worse he felt. There was no sign of lies, no plan to harm him, nothing suspicious. Every video showed the same thing: Sandra caring for his son, reading to him, helping him smile. He clicked on one last video, one he hadn't noticed before. It was recorded just before she left. Sandra was sitting in David's room, holding the boy's hand. "Be strong for your father," she whispered. "He's lost too much already." Michael paused. His hands shook slightly as he stared at the screen. Those words weren't the words of a liar. They were the words of someone who cared, someone who wanted peace, not pain. He leaned back in his chair, covering his face with both hands. Tears slipped through his fingers. For the first time in years, he didn't hide them. He thought about the moment he had shouted at her, the way she had stood there quietly, refusing to fight back. He thought about David's small voice saying she did nothing wrong, and he realized they had both been right. 2 days passed. David still refused to eat or speak. He kept the small wooden music box on his lap, the one Sandra had brought for him. Sometimes he wound it up and listened to the soft tune, his eyes full of sorrow. Michael couldn't take it anymore. He picked up his phone and called the private detective he had hired weeks before. "Do you have her full background report?" he asked in a low voice. "Yes, sir. I was just about to send it. But there's something you should know." Michael frowned. "What is it?" "She was telling the truth, Mr. Scott. Her mother really did work for your parents. I found the old employment records and photos. Your father gave her that silver locket as a farewell gift before she left. There's even a handwritten note from him thanking her for her kindness. And there's more. Sandra was at St. Mary's Hospital the night your wife passed. She was a volunteer. The nurses say your wife spoke to her before surgery. She asked her to look after your son if anything happened to her." Michael's heart dropped. He sat in silence, gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir," the detective replied. "Everything is confirmed." Michael hung up without another word. He sat frozen, staring at the wall. His wife had trusted Sandra long before he ever met her. His father had trusted her family, and he had destroyed that trust because of his own fear. A few hours later, he made a decision. He picked up the locket from his desk, got into his car, and drove to the address listed in her file. The sky was gray, the road quiet. When he arrived, he saw a small apartment building with peeling paint and narrow stairs. He climbed slowly, his heart heavy. He knocked. A moment later, Sandra opened the door. Her eyes widened in surprise. She didn't say anything. "I came to say I'm sorry. For everything," Michael said quietly. Sandra looked at him, unsure what to say. Her voice was calm. "You didn't believe me," she said softly. "I know. I was wrong. I found the truth. My father trusted your mother, and my wife trusted you. I was blind. I let fear control me, and I hurt the only person who truly cared for my son." Tears welled in Sandra's eyes, but she didn't move. "I don't expect forgiveness," Michael continued, "but I need you to know that I'm sorry. You brought life back to my son, and I repaid you with pain." Sandra looked down, her voice shaking slightly. "I never wanted anything from you, sir. I only wanted to keep a promise, to your wife and to my mother." Michael nodded slowly. "Then please," he said softly, "come back. Not as my employee, as someone we need." Sandra hesitated. The memory of that day still hurt, but when she thought of David's face, his laughter, and his promise to try again, her heart softened. She wiped her tears and said, "I'll come to see him. That's all for now." Michael nodded gratefully. That's enough. The next morning the mansion was no longer silent. The staff stood near the door, whispering as a car arrived. David waited in his room, his hands gripping the sides of his wheelchair. When Sandra entered, his eyes filled with tears. "You came back," he whispered. "I promised, didn't I?" Sandra smiled softly. David reached for her hand. "Can we try again?" he asked. Sandra nodded, placing her hands gently on his shoulders. "Whenever you're ready." Michael stood quietly at the doorway, watching. Sandra helped David press down on his chair, guiding his movement. Slowly, his legs trembled, then straightened a little. He lifted himself for a few seconds before sitting back down, breathing hard, but smiling wide. Everyone in the room gasped. The nurses clapped. Michael's eyes filled again, and he didn't look away this time. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Thank you," he whispered to Sandra. She looked up at him, her eyes warm but humble. "It wasn't me, sir. He just needed someone to believe in him again."
Later that evening, Michael gathered all the staff in the grand hall. He stood before them, nervous but sincere. "I made a terrible mistake," he began. "I let fear and pain make me blind. I hurt someone who brought light back into this house. From today, there will be no more hidden cameras, no more secrets. Sandra is not just a worker here. She's part of this family." The room was silent for a moment. Then applause filled the hall. Sandra's eyes filled with tears as she looked at David, who smiled proudly at her. From that day, the mansion changed. The cameras were removed. The rooms filled with laughter and warmth again. Michael started a new foundation in his wife's memory, helping children like David. Sandra worked by his side, guiding the project with her kindness. And in that house where silence once lived, hope had finally returned. Dear viewers, this story reminds us that trust can heal what fear once destroyed. Sometimes the people we doubt the most are the ones sent to bring light back into our lives. If you were touched by this story, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more emotional stories like this. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from and what lesson you learned from Michael and Sandra's journey. And if you want more powerful stories like this one, comment "more stories" below. You might be the first to get the next emotional story.